Great, you've successfully installed the Raspberry Pi operating system, configured the Wi-Fi, and you know the IP address of the Raspberry Pi in the network. What we can do now is to use SSH to take control over the Raspberry Pi and really get access to it. This will provide you with command line access in a terminal, which we are going to use in the next lesson to install VNC and get access to the Raspberry Pi desktop. Don't worry too much about understanding command lines and how a terminal works for now. We will come back to it in a future section of this course. For now, this is just a required step of the configuration, so please follow every instruction one by one and make sure you write the exact same thing as I write here. So first of all, I'm going to open a file explorer here and go to my main partition here, go to users to select your username, okay, and here you may see a .ssh folder here. If you don't see it, well, you have nothing to do and you can just skip the next 20 seconds or so. If you have an SSH folder, you're going to go inside and you may have a known hosts file. What you can do is, if you don't know SSH or stuff, you can just simply remove that file for now. It may prevent some errors when you try to connect to your Raspberry Pi. Okay, and now what you can do is to open a terminal, okay? So Windows key and then CMD or command, and click on that, and this will open a terminal on Windows. So if you are using Linux, I guess you know how to use a terminal, and if you're using Mac, you can also open a new terminal, okay? And if you're using Windows 10, okay, Windows 10 with a quite recently updated version, you can simply connect to the Raspberry Pi with SSH on the terminal. So you can easily check if you have SSH available for you on Windows 10. Okay, simply you can type SSH on the terminal and press enter. Okay, here I have a message usage SSH. So if you have that, it means you have SSH and you don't need to do anything else. If you don't have that, and if instead you have a message like SSH command not found, then it means you won't be able to use SSH in the Windows terminal. So in that case, in that very specific case on Windows, you would need to install another software to use SSH, and you can, for example, use PuTTY. So you can go on putty.org and you can simply download it, install the software, and then start it. So PuTTY is an SSH client. You can use it the same way we are going to use this command line here. This will just make you use a GUI tool, so you will have to fill up the IP address, the username, and the password, as we are going to do here. So coming back to the terminal, what you can do to get access to your Raspberry Pi is to type SSH and then space, and then you need to provide the username. So what is the username for Raspberry Pi, for your Raspberry Pi? Well, the default username that is already here when you flash the OS into the card is named simply Pi, okay? So there is no way for you to discover that. It's simply the default one that I'm giving it to you here. You can also find it on the Raspberry Pi website. So we are going to be connected as the user named Pi. Then you can put @ and the IP address that you found here with your IP scanner software. So for me, it will be 192.168.43.56. So of course that will be different for you, okay? So just use the IP address you found there, and then you can simply press enter, okay? For the very first connection, you will have that message. Are you sure you want to continue connecting? Because actually the host here, your machine doesn't know, has not been connected to your Raspberry Pi before, so you can just press yes, okay? And now it's asking you for the password, okay? So we have the user Pi and we need to give the password. So what is the password? Well, the password is simply Raspberry, okay, like that. No uppercase, no space, no nothing, just Raspberry like that. So you can go ahead and type Raspberry, you will not see anything, okay? As you can see when I typed, you will not see anything written on the screen. And then you press enter. And if it works, if you've provided the correct password, then you're in. You can see here, you have the Pi user, and then the hostname is Raspberry Pi, and you are connected to the Raspberry Pi for the first time. Great. And now that you're in, let's go ahead and go to the next lesson so we can have access to the Raspberry Pi desktop.